If you're watching this video, it's probably because you have a son or a daughter that you now have to take care of, even though they're an adult. Maybe they're 19 and they've just come home from their first year of college and they're ill for some reason. Maybe it's a mental health issue, maybe it's a auto accident, maybe it's a skiing accident, but whatever it is, you have to take care of them, and you thought that you were already launching them. Or they may be in their 20s, or they may be even in their 30s. And so the purpose of this video is to explain some perspective on how to go about making a contract with your son or daughter about getting well and about getting independent again. I'm Dr. Greg Hamlin. I'm a psychologist, and I'm also the creator of the Pull Me Close video course. And I do a lot of work with couples and families to help them learn conflict management and do it better so that they can actually be closer. And certainly when you have a young adult that is wanting to play video games all day, or not get a job, or not go to school, and is just waiting for something, it can make parents kind of nervous. And so I want to talk with you about how to deal with that nervousness. Now keep in mind that one video is not going to give you the solution to your particular situation. And you're going to see that it's important for you to talk with a therapist on the ground, preferably the therapist that is working with your son or daughter, if it's a mental health issue. But either way, it's going to give you some perspective on how to think about the problem, and even some things to say, the kinds of wording that you want to use, the kind of wording you want to use when you're having a little chat with your son or daughter. Oftentimes, there is conflict between two parents because they have different ways of looking at the issue. So there's one parent that is feeling like our son or our daughter, they're just taking advantage of us. They need to just get out and get a job. We need to talk tough with them. The other one is saying, no, wait, they're fragile. They need our support. They need our help. And so these conflicts that may have already been there between partners in a family become magnified with the high stakes issue of how do we help our son or our daughter relaunch into an independent adult living. So let's start with just looking at getting some perspective. There's two extremes that you want to avoid. On the one hand, you want to avoid a harsh stance that just says you need to just tough it out and get out there and do what you need to do to be independent. Get a job, go back to school. It could be that it's very obvious to you that your child can't. Maybe they were in a car accident and they've had several surgeries, they're in a body cast. In that case, you have a visual that shows you that they can't do that. Or your young adult might have mental health issues. Maybe they're depressed. Maybe they had to leave college because they were depressed, or they were having multiple panic attacks that they just couldn't bring under control. Maybe they had to move home in the middle of a school year. And so you're wanting to have them do something to get well, and you're feeling frustrated and helpless. So on the one hand, you want to avoid the extreme of being too tough, because you need to be able to understand the real issues that are going on for your son or daughter. And that's something that I can't help you with in this video. But if they are suicidal, or they've threatened suicide, or they've had high anxiety that's been debilitating, you can actually help them by paying for a therapist, helping them to get settled in therapy, and also making an arrangement whereby you can actually talk with the therapist. And I'll talk about how to do that in an ethical and legal way, in a way that's respectful to all parties. So you want to avoid the extreme of being too tough, because it's really true that some young adults need a second launching or a third launching from their parents. They need help to regroup, to heal from an injury, to heal from some mental health issue, and they need you to empower them to get them moving again in a timeline that's realistic for what they're dealing with, not just the timeline that you want. On the other hand, you want to avoid the extreme of becoming your child's enabler. What does that mean? An enabler is someone who is very upset about a problem in another person, but the decisions they make and the way they act and the way they speak actually support the person to stay in those issues. The enabling concept comes from Alcoholics Anonymous and recovery world, where, you know, the classic situation where I can't stand the fact that my son or daughter drinks, but I give them a monthly allowance and they buy alcohol with it. Well, that you're enabling them, okay? You're helping them do the very thing that's bothering you about how they're doing life. So when you just give your adult child a blank check, you know, come home as long as you need, we'll help you. You're doing their laundry for them, you're giving them food, you give them spending money, and they spend most of their time doing other things that have nothing to do with bettering themselves other than just avoiding the stress. Now, to be fair, sometimes a young adult comes home after a horrendous experience. It could be a trauma, and they do need a few weeks, maybe even a few months, Usually not that long, but usually they may need a few months to just recuperate and rest. The way you know whether they need that or not is you have them evaluated by a physician or a psychiatrist or a psychologist, and in order to determine what their needs are. You want to be respectful of their needs. But what do you do when they're just not wanting to do anything and you know that they can? You're very sure that they can. Well, you have to have a talk with them, and you actually need to have a series of talks, because one conversation won't do it, and the nature of these conversations can be very emotional, and so you don't want to try to cram everything into one conversation. Otherwise, one or both parties will get overwhelmed, flooded, and lots of hurtful things will be said, and it just plain won't be constructive. But you need to, first of all, think through on your end as a parent, what are you trying to do? So I would say, for starters, that the goal of parenting is not only to love your child, but to love your child in a way that prepares them for independent living. And if you are now finding yourself in the parenting role again when you thought you were over that, your job as a parent, if you choose to take that mission, is to help them prepare for adult living independent from you as much as possible. Now, a little sidebar here. This video is not about chronic conditions. I'm not talking about a situation where your son or daughter has a permanent disability and there's no way they're ever going to be able to hold a full-time job or be able to support themselves. We're not talking about that situation. We're talking about a situation where there is a temporary setback that is substantial, big enough to make your son or daughter come home and try to figure out what their next move is. So what you want to do is get clear on your goal. Your goal is to prepare your son or your daughter for a successful relaunch so they can be independent. That launch may be over a period of months. It might be implemented gradually. It's not a sudden thing necessarily, but you're always keeping an eye on how to get them have as much independence as possible. This is very important, not only for you, but it's important for your son or daughter. If you enable them and you let them just cruise, they will despise themselves. And then they will blame you for letting them be in that position. And that will make you angry because that seems totally unfair, but that's how it works. So what you need is a plan. And then once you have a general framework in your mind, then you can talk with your son or your daughter about what's going to happen and get their input and refine the plan so that everybody has buy-in to it. And it really is not that hard to get buy-in. You know, one of the ways if your son or daughter says, I don't want to talk about it, no, I'm not going to get a job, no, I'm not going to school, you can't make me, you know, basically say, you know, things are going to change here, we're going to have a plan, and we'd like you to be a part of it, we'd like you to have input in it, we'd like to modify things so that it fits your needs. But if you don't want to participate in it, we're going to make the plan without you. We don't want to do that. We absolutely don't want to do that. But we will make the plan one way or another. So please reconsider and think about participating in this process so that we can get you in a place where you feel very satisfied with how your life is going. We want to help you do that. We're not trying to make you like us. We're not trying to make you be like us. But we want to help you become an independent adult where you feel like you can just make your own decisions without us, don't have to worry about us, just do your life and you're happy. That's what we're aiming for. So that's the kind of talking that you need to have initially. And then you want to let them know that this is going to be challenging and we're going to have a number of different conversations along the way in order to get to a point where we actually have a document. We actually have a contract. And why do we need a contract? Isn't it just family? Can't we just be, you know, a family and not have to do a contract? It does sound like overkill when you first think about it, but if you've ever been through this with a child, an adult child, you know that ends up being a lot of arguments that go something like this. Well, you said, no, you didn't. No, we didn't say that. Yes, you did. No, we didn't. Yes, you did. No, we didn't. And it becomes really murky about what was actually agreed upon and what the terms were. So it's very important to actually have a contract. Now, if you look at the link below this video and in the description section, I will have a link to where you can get a mock-up or a basic template for how to get started. It's a lot easier to start writing something when you don't have a blank page staring back at you. So here are some of the things that you need to say to your son or daughter. Now, this is very important. This is maybe one of the key things in this video is because you're an adult, there are only certain options for what you can be doing with your time. Option one is be independent and working full-time and supporting yourself. Probably not an option though, because you wouldn't be in this situation if that were going, oh, okay. Option number two, we will help support you while you go to college or some training program so that you can become independent and have the skills and the marketability you need to be able to have gainful employment. Again, that's probably not an option immediately because you wouldn't be in that situation if it were. The third option is that your full-time job is to get well, to get strong, to become ready to take more on, to gradually take on more responsibility with a view towards, as soon as possible, being able to handle the stress and strain of adult living. So this is how you frame it. And one of the reasons that couples oftentimes have trouble with this is that they're kind of tiptoeing around their child's needs. They're thinking, oh, you know, she threatened suicide, she's been suicidal before, he's threatened suicide, so we just feel like we have to tiptoe around this because what if we push them over the edge? That's always the lingering thought, right? But the thing is, it doesn't help to tiptoe around it because part of what makes a person suicidal oftentimes is they feel useless. So you want to help them, empower them to feel like their life matters and that you're putting energy and time and love and conversation into them, not because you're irritated by them or because you just want to get rid of them or get them out of your hair, but because you genuinely care and you want to launch them, even if they don't see the importance of that at this moment. So what you need to do is say, this is your job. And in order for us to support you financially, give you a place to live, food to eat, etc., etc. We want to know that you are accepting this mantle, that your job right now is to get well. If you can't work, then you're trying to figure out what you need to, how you need to grow, how you need to heal. You're seeing the right people. If let's say it was an auto accident and the adult child is recovering. Well, part of their full-time job of recovery is going to their physical therapy or doing their surgeries, going through with their surgeries, whatever it takes to kind of move forward. And so you want to emphasize that point, and that's something that bears repeating in every conversation you have with them. Just say, we have responsibilities that are full-time. You have responsibilities that are full-time. Maybe you can't, maybe right now, your doctor says you need to rest. So maybe the only thing you can do is go to your therapy appointment once a week or go to physical therapy. And we're going to support you in that. But as soon as you're ready, we want to increase that. We want you to increase it. So this is how you approach it. Now, there's another thing you need to communicate, because one of the things that is important to young adults is independence. One of the things that's very important in this whole situation is being respectful of the developmental phase that your young adult son or daughter is in. So people that are in 19, 20, all through their 20s, they're in a stage of life where they're pushing away from parents to assert their own independence. It's a good thing. It's a natural thing. And a lot of times when young adults are pretty snarky and belligerent with their parents, once they prove to themselves that they are independent, they reconnect because they no longer feel like they have to defend their turf. So it's a very natural thing. We've all been through it. And so how do you handle that when you have this sticky situation of, say, a 22-year-old, 25-year-old that has to come home again? They're a legal adult. On the one hand, you feel like you have no business to tell them what to do, and they certainly feel that way. On the other hand, you're not willing to just become their enabler and just sort of be in the background and help them do whatever they want to do in their own time, because you have skin in the game now. You have a stake in this. You're all adults, and you're giving, and you want something in return, which is appropriate. But you have to navigate this in a way where you are respectful. So here's what I suggest you say. You say, let's say your daughter's name is Jessica. So Jessica, we realize that you're an adult. We would like it if we didn't have to be hassling you about anything. And that would be the case if you were living on your own and just coming to visit us, or we're visiting you. But we have a situation here where we need to help you, and you seem to want that. And we want to do that. We want to help you get on your feet again. We want to help you launch and be very happy as your own person. We don't want to control you. However, there is the reality that we have this temporary situation, emphasize the word temporary, where we need to get more involved with you than we would have been had you not had to come home. Because we have skin in the game. This is a high stakes thing for you, but it's also for us. And what we want to do to ensure the success of getting you where you want to be, where you need to be, is we want to be a team. We want to work with you. And please know that as soon as we can, we want to back off. We want to have some agreements, but our desire is not to keep you under our thumb. It's not to control you. It's not to make you be like us. It's to help you find your own way. But in order to do that, in order to relaunch you, we have to be involved in a way that may seem a little odd and may seem out of place for the age that you are, but that's the reality that we have. So we're going to be involved, but we're not trying to keep and hang on to that involvement. We're trying to work ourselves out of a job as quickly as possible. But we are committed to being a part of that team to help you. What's not an option is for us to just stand back and just kind of do whatever you need and then just watch you make decisions that we believe could be self-destructive or greatly delay your launching again. So these are the kinds of words that you say, and then you want to back it up with a plan. So there needs to be some medical assessment. There needs to be some outside assessment, outside the family, that will help you get a realistic look at what your expectations should be. Because if your expectations are unrealistic, your young adult child is going to be so frustrated and angry at you, and you're going to be frustrated, and the whole thing is just going to blow up. But if you have some good data and good information about what they're capable of, and you're only asking for the next thing on that list, then you can keep moving, and you go one step at a time to get them to a better place, either recovery from an addiction, or to be dealing with other mental health issues, or it could be physical issues and limitations that are temporary, an injury or something of that nature. Now, the other thing is that you have to introduce the idea that these talks are going to be periodic updates. You know, once a month we're going to sit down and we're going to talk together about how it's going. And we're going to listen to you and what your complaints are about us. We're going to take notes, we're going to write it down, and we also want you to hear us and things that we would like to see going forward in the next month. And that way we can refine it, because we know it won't be perfect as we right out of the gate, but we want to work on it. The other thing is, we want you to sign a release with your therapist. This is assuming it's a mental health issue. And we're not going to be involved in your therapy. We're not going to be asking you what you talk about with your therapist. But since we're paying for the therapy, this is what we want. We want every couple of months, 2 or 3 months, we want to have a family session where we can come in with you and we can ask some questions of your therapist about your general progress and what's reasonable for us to expect of you. So we want to get an idea of how a professional sees your ability to move forward and your functioning. Now, this might seem overwhelming, but we're just going to start one step at a time. And for now, we just want to let you know that we're going to be having these conversations. So that's kind of an overview of how you deal with your young adult child. You're basically trying to have a changing equation where the less that they're able to do for themselves, the more you're doing to encourage them and structure the situation to help them move forward. The more they take that on and take more responsibility for themselves, you have to be sure to back off. So, for example, one thing you don't do is, you don't say to your 25-year-old who's, making good progress in therapy and has now got a part-time job and not ready to move out. You don't say, "Wow, I noticed you didn't come home last night. Who were you with?" You don't do that. That's not appropriate. They're an adult. They have their own social life. Don't get involved in that. You do have a right to speak up about things that pertain to independence, especially if it's a pattern. You don't want to nitpick. You don't want to make comments, but on these regular monthly conversations or weekly conversations, then that's the time when you can bring things up. You can't be making little digs and comments between those times. Now, finally, there's an issue that has to do with how the parents work together. Now, one of the things I really appreciate about John Gottman and his research at the University of Washington and the Love Lab is that his research shows that most couples, which means parents of young adult children, have what are called perpetual issues. That the disagreements that we have in our relationships are sometimes solvable, but many times they're not. And what they found was that when they brought couples to observe them and they looked at what kinds of topics those couples were arguing about, they found that there was the same topic that they argued about 5 years later, and then 10 years later, and then in some cases 15 years later. Same topic. Couples that do well are aware of their very different ways of looking at things. They also are aware that they're never going to quite be on the same page, but they have found a way to keep the conversation civil and respectful and solve intermediate and short-term problems together despite their differences. So when you have a young adult come home from college or move back in because they can't work anymore, it's going to bring up most likely tensions. You're going to have different fears because you're different people. So a dad might be wondering, might be most afraid of, they're not going to be able to be able to get a job. They're not going to be marketable if they don't have anything on their resume, and they're going to be very anxious about getting them working again. Maybe the mom is going to be worried about not pushing them too hard. Our son is fragile. Why would we push him, so that he has a worse crisis? So because the stakes are so high, sometimes you're talking about suicidal ideation, and you're feeling very nervous. The stakes are so high that you can start becoming at odds with each other, and there's a lot of conflict. So one of the things I recommend is you to look at my course, pullmeclose.com. It's an online video course, and yes, this is a commercial for that course, but it will help you kind of get your bearings on how to communicate with each other and how to slow things down so that you can make decisions together. Because ultimately what's going to help your son or daughter is if you both are on relatively the same page and you're working through a plan that makes sense. I hope you found this helpful. I want to reiterate that you don't just take this video and then just implement it. You need to make sure that you are talking with the medical people, therapists, etc., that are working with your son or daughter so that your expectations and your ideas about what this plan should include is realistic. And the rule of thumb is it's got to be kind of on a scale of 1 to 10 degree of difficulty, where 10 is the worst and hardest thing to do. It's got to feel like a 4 for your son or daughter. If it's a 3, then it's still in their comfort zone. That's too easy. If it's a 5 or a 6, you're getting outside, you're getting into the area where it can start to be overwhelming. But a 4 or 5, yeah, that's good. Just outside their comfort zone, and you're not criticizing them, and you're not making your love conditional, but you are encouraging them to go to the next step for the plan that you've worked out with their team. And that reminds me of one more thing that I'm going to throw in here. It really does help, I've found, young adults when you let them know at the very outset that you not only love them, but you want to help them build a team of support, and that you are signing up to be the first members of that team. Let's say your son's name is John. You say, we're on Team John, and we're going to get your therapist on that team. We're going to get a physician on that team. Whoever needs to be on that team, we're going to build that team so that you are supported to go as far as you need to go in your healing and in your independence from us. Thanks for listening. I'm Dr. Greg Hamlin.